The Swindoll family, as you know it, began many, many years ago. In fact, in 1930, Earl Langston Swindoll fell in love with Lovell Lucille Lundy, and they married in October of 1930. Their firstborn, Orville Earl, named after my mother's dad, Lewis Orville, and my father, Earl Langston, Orville Earl, was born about 10 months after they were married. So he came along quickly. My sister came in September of 1932, and then I was born. My sister's name is Lovell Lucille, and I was born in October of 1934. My name is Charles Roselle, named after my dad's brother, Charles, and my mother's brother, Roselle. Well, it was the three of us as we got started in life, and as you would imagine, the most prominent and dominant of the three of us was my brother Orville, being the oldest and also the strongest leader among us. He sort of took charge in a number of occasions. What a remarkable boy he was. My mother and dad realized early that he was extremely bright, and on top of all of that, he was very gifted in music. And it seemed as though his preferred instrument was the piano. He perfected his performance as a pianist, and I don't believe it's an exaggeration to say that Orville could have pursued a future in a career of concert piano work, but that wasn't God's plan for his life. Orville, by the way, took piano from the premier teacher in Houston, where we were growing up at the time, Rebecca Friedman Miller, and when they had their recitals, Orville was often the star of the recital. He would play pieces like Bach's Solfagetto and Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. Paderewski's Minuet was another of his favorites. He could just strong hands, muscular fingers, and he was really a master of the keyboard. He could also pursue a future in science, and he won the Bosch and Lohm Award in high school, which granted him a scholarship to Rice Institute, now known as Rice University. I remember as a teenager, he built his own radio, of all things. He was a ham operator and loved electronics. Could have pursued a future in that as well. But the Lord had other plans. My sister became a student at Mary Hardin Baylor College, and she had a roommate named Irma Jean Hensley. And my sister said to our older brother, you know, Orville, you need to meet my roommate. She's your type of person. Not only did he meet Irma Jean, but they married and were married all their adult lives. It was a beautiful marriage, a beautiful relationship. My brother was actually led to God's work in the ministry as a young adult, and his heart was always on the whole world. The Lord opened doors for him as he learned the Spanish language, along with Irma Jean as well, and then the two of them ultimately moved to Buenos Aires, where they spent over almost 35 years of their married life, where they raised their 4 children, Lovell and Julia, Gloria, and David. In the meantime, I and pursuing other things in my life and Lucy in hers. But little did my mother and dad realize that the three of us ultimately would be involved in the Lord's work in unique ways. My brother at that time was already making his mark as a missionary among the Latins, and my sister became involved in a wonderful ministry to women. It was a ministry known as Women of Faith. She was involved in that for years as they led literally thousands to Christ. And after I was finished with my training and schooling, the Lord led me into ministry, to my surprise and my wife's delight. But let me get back to Orville, because that's where our paths crossed, which had such a significant part in my ministry. I'll go back to our boyhood days. We shared the same bedroom as we were growing up. He was in a twin bed over by the window, and my bed was by the door. And I remember awakening at night, just teenagers, and I would see Orville on his knees in prayer. I don't know that I knew any other teenager that took the Lord so seriously. My brother never pursued anything half-heartedly, but was always intentional and sometimes very intense and determined in the pursuit he was engaged in. And when he fell in love with Christ and the Lord got hold of his heart, there was never a doubt. No interest from then on in a career in music or in science or what. It was the Lord's work that he was to have a part in. Let me go behind the scenes and connect our lives together. While I was in the Marine Corps, to my sudden surprise and disappointment, orders came that I was to be moved from my first tour of duty, which was in San Francisco, to the island of Okinawa, 8,000 miles away. I'd only been married a year and a half, and that was a tearful moment for my wife and me. I'll never forget taking the flight from Houston, where she would live with her parents while I was away in the Marine Corps, and I was on my way to San Diego, where we were in a staging regiment to prepare for a trip across the ocean on a great large troop ship. And before we left the shore, I discovered, in fact, my folks had written me and said that Orville and Ermagine were living in Pasadena at the time. I was very disillusioned. I was disappointed with God, in all honesty. But I thought it might be helpful if I would just spend some time with my older brother, because he seemed to never be disappointed with God and never struggled, it seemed to me, in his walk. So I took a bus to Pasadena. They met me and were so warm and gracious to spend time with me. And it wasn't long before they realized my heart was broken over the future I was facing. 16, 18 months without my bride and lovely wife. And my brother said to me before I left their home that night to catch the bus back to Camp Pendleton, he said, "I've got a book for you. I want you to read it." And I said, "I'm not interested in reading some Christian book." He said, "Well, I didn't ask if you were interested. I told you you need to read this book." And I said, "I'm not going to read it, so you can just keep it." He said, "No, look at it. The binding is already coming off of it." This was 65 years ago, 1957, end of the year. And he handed me a book titled "Through Gates of Splendor" by Elizabeth Elliot. He gave me a book to read. I got back on the bus that night, and it was raining, and the rain was hitting the windows. And I don't know that I'd ever been more sad in my life. And I thought, well, I think I'll read that book. I'll at least start it. Well, I couldn't put it down. It's the story of 5 young men who, shortly after getting out of college, pursued their life's dream of reaching a tribe in Ecuador, the Auca Indians. It's the story of their desire to reach them, and in the process, all 5 were martyred. They gave their life for the vision that God had given them to reach those people. This is a book about that, Through Gates of Splendor. Elizabeth Elliot, one of the widows, Jim Elliot's wife, wrote the book, and I couldn't put it down. In fact, I sat up all night in the men's room, the only place where there was light all night at the barracks, and I read every page. I not only read it then on the ship going to first Yokohama, Japan, and then later Okinawa, I read it yet again. I kept it on the little desk I had while I was serving on the island of Okinawa. It changed my whole perspective. I have my brother Orville to thank for giving me a book that changed the whole direction of my thinking. I was no longer consumed with self-pity. I was no longer sad over what I wasn't going to be able to do. And I realized in reading this book and entering into the lives of those 5 widows and those 5 men who had given their life to reach the Aucas, who were later evangelized, thanks to some of the wives who went back to the very people who had killed their husbands and led them to Christ. That's another story. But he gave me a book that provided perspective that would change the course of my life. I had no idea I'd be involved in ministry at that time. As God would have it, I did go back to school, went to seminary, graduated after 4 years, and was involved in ministry from that time on, about age 25 to this present moment, still involved in it. And I have my brother to thank for giving me a book that changed my mind about all of these things related to God's will. It isn't about me. It's about the Lord. Jim Elliot wrote, and it's recorded, "He's no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose." What a great statement. And I often have focused on the lives of those 5 who gave their life for the Savior. And I have the privilege now of serving the Lord. And I have my older brother to thank for making me acquainted with a book that was written. By the way, the copyright is 1957. It was fresh off the press when he gave me my copy. Orville visited our home when I was involved in ministry in Fullerton, California. I was sort of under a load of pressure. There were a lot of responsibilities I was involved in, and quite a bit of criticism that comes with being in ministry. And Orville caught that when he was visiting with me, and he said, "Charles, I want to teach you a song." It's an old song. In fact, it's so old, it's no longer in the hymnals, but I want you to learn the song and I want you to remember it. It'll lift your spirits. And then he sat down at the piano, put his hands on the keys, and fingers began to play, "Come ye disconsolate, where'er you languish. Come to the mercy seat, fervently kneel. Here, bring your wounded heart. Here, tell your anguish. Earth has no sorrow that heaven cannot heal." I love that hymn. He not only gave me a book to read, to redirect the whole future of my life, he gave me a song to remember. And to this day, I will repeat the words, the lyrics of that song, that old hymn, "Come Ye Disconsolate." And I have Orville to thank for teaching that song to me, that great hymn. But best of all, when I think of my brother, this missionary statesman who distinguished himself among so many whose lives he touched, I'm grateful for the life he lived that I could respect all my life. A book to read, a song to remember, and a life to respect. Never a scandal, never got cold in his walk with Christ, never wandered, never unfaithful to his wife, always there, always serving, often sacrificially, and there are stories I could tell you about that would bring tears to your eyes. And there he was, in his own way, thousands of miles away from where he had been reared, building into the lives of the now adult children who have had such a major part in planning this service, this memorial in his honor. Their lives have also been shaped not only by their mother, Irma Jean, who died several years ago, but of their father, Orville Earl Swindoll. Born August the 5th, 1931, died August the 10th, 2022, leaving the memory of a life well lived and worth respecting, not only by his brother who's in ministry, but by so many of you who are hearing me today and agreeing with me. How grateful we are that the Lord picked up the life of a little boy born in El Campo, Texas, a little South Texas town, raised in Houston after World War II began, and pursued a future that was beyond what his mother and dad and even his siblings, Lucy and Chuck, would ever imagine. There's a song that says, "Give of your sons to bear the message glorious. Give of your wealth to speed them on their way. Pour out your soul for them in prayer victorious, and all you spend, Jesus will repay." God gave Earl and Lovell their firstborn, Orville Earl. They poured their lives into him, and he poured his life into us. And as a result, God has been glorified. And we give him praise upon every remembrance of a life so well lived. I'm grateful for the book he gave me to read, for the song he taught me to remember, and for the life that I will forever respect. Thank you, Lord, for a life like that.